You've all been waiting for. Paranormal Buzz Radio is proud to present REP Paranormal and Friends with your hosts, Kim Purvis and Allison Robinson. Live every Thursday night on Spreaker, 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 Central, 5 Pacific. Be sure to check out their Facebook page, REP Paranormal Busters.
The views and opinions expressed in this podcast by the host or the guest do not necessarily reflect the views of Paranormal Buzz Radio or its sponsors. Use of any material produced by Paranormal Buzz Radio without express written consent is strictly prohibited. For information on everything Paranormal Buzz Radio has to offer, visit our website, paranormalbuzzradio.com. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter and Instagram. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to another night of REP Paranormal and Friends. We have a special guest tonight. We have Mark Fiorentino, author of Master of Reality, and also going to be discussing a little bit of Einstein and his unified field of theory and how maybe UFOs and conspiracy go along with all this. Somehow we'll figure that out tonight. So welcome, Mark, to the show. How are you doing?
Fine, thank you. It's good to be here.
Yes, it's good to have you. This is something totally new for us. Like I was talking earlier, I'm into science. I've never really studied a whole lot about this part of science, more of the animal stuff. So this is going to be very fascinating for me. So how about you give us a little bit of background on yourself and how did you get obsessed with Einstein? You've been doing this since what, like you were 10 or so?
That's right. Yeah, I got into it a long time ago, just kind of a fluky thing. I was going to catechism classes, and I remember the nuns asking us to find a saint born on our birthday. So I went home, and there was no internet in 1964, 1965. And so I asked my parents if they knew of any saints born on my birthday, and of course they didn't. Mm-hmm. March 14th. So I went over, I remember going to the calendar. I still remember this little obscure thing, going to the calendar and looking at it and seeing Albert Einstein's name on my birthday. So I went over to the Encyclopedia Britannica that my parents had gotten for us, and I looked him up and was fascinated by what I read. I thought, wow, this is really exciting, really a neat human being, and eventually I got into the whole unified field theory thing, and I thought to myself, this really makes sense, and I just resonated when I read that, and from that point on, I got a great love for science, all the different fields, but mainly physics, and so I just kept reading and enjoying science, and I did very well in that and at school. And I just, from that point on, became a really big Albert Einstein fan, and just kept reading about and hoping someday to read about the solution to the unified field theory. And I just wanted to know that before I died. And wanted to see his dream come true and be realized. Right. And I was reading and reading over the years, waiting for somebody to find out, figure it out, waiting. And then finally, many years later, I'm 60-something years old. And when I retired, I decided to write this book. It just said, this is a great thing. I'll retire early, a couple of years early, and I'll start my retirement off the first day of retirement, January 2nd. I started writing the book, and I wrote it consecutively every day, a little bit every day for the next 4 years. Wow. And I discovered along the way the person I had been waiting for was me.
Oh.
It was kind of a surprise. I never really thought about that until then. And when I had finished the book, and I said, this is a theory. This is a good, solid, sensible theory, and there's a good chance it's right. A very good chance. And so here we are. Sometime after that now, I'm going out and talking about the book and everything. But that's basically how I got into the whole physics and unified field theory and Albert Einstein. It just started with something as simple as that so many years ago in childhood.
Very nice. Now, so you were in the field of computers. You worked for IBM, and there was another one that you worked for, and you were into IT. How did that help you with your book and how you got into figuring out maybe how this...
It's a good question.
Yeah.
It's a very good question because it did contribute. Everyone should realize that there's no accidents in your life path. You make the choices with help. If you're listening to the other side, they'll guide you. And I was guided into electronics, and I became a troubleshooter, mainly in IBM and some of my other jobs. And so what I really did to solve the unified field theory problem and where the origin of mass and gravity comes from was I troubleshot the problem. And it really starts with troubleshooting physics. And the big question I started off with is why all the greatest minds in physics, all of them, for the last 75 years ago, have failed to solve this problem. And eventually the answer came to me that they have the wrong mechanical model. If you don't have the right model, you're never going to figure out the unified field theory. And Einstein had that right model all along. He was just born too soon. If he had been born 50 years later, I wouldn't have had to write the book because the problem would have been solved.
Right.
I'm certain of it. He was right on the threshold all the way up until when he died. He worked on it to the very last days of his life.
Didn't he work on it for like over 30 years or something like that?
Well, starting, right after the general theory of relativity, I guess around 1920 there, all the way up through 1925, there was papers coming out from him about the unified field theory. He continued to work after that, but there were certain things he was missing. He didn't know about. That he had the idea for the right model coming from something called the Ehrenfest paradox. When he read that and saw that, he said, "Eureka!" It was his happiest moment, one of his happiest thoughts. And he had the model, but he didn't know the details of what was inside of the neutron and the proton, which eventually led me, using the Ehrenfest paradox model, to say, oh, okay, now I can apply this to particles. This is what Einstein was trying to do. So, he is a brilliant man, and he was right after all. And the modern day physicist has a problem in that they're bound tightly to the quantum mechanics model, which is a model that really can't tell you how anything works. There's no mechanics in quantum mechanics. It's really just probabilities and statistics. You can't get information on how things work. It's got to be actions and forces and deterministic, and quantum mechanics is definitely not that. So I troubleshot the problem from learning about electronics and troubleshooting electronic circuit boards and software programs and such. So it was a great help.
That's very cool. That's very cool. Now, are there 4 parts to the quantum mechanics? Is there
4 parts?
Yeah, is there 4 parts to it?
I'm not sure what you're referring to, the 4 parts of quantum mechanics.
see here. You can't read.
There
I
is
can't,
the
I can't
four
read my
forces.
writing.
Oh, I think you're talking about the forces, the four
Yes, the
forces.
forces. Yes, I'm talking about the forces. Yes.
Yeah, yeah, I see what you're saying now. Um, yeah, that's part of the broken model. So going into, well, there's the strong and weak nuclear force and gravity and electromagnetism. And so I had to kind of discard that model and say two of those forces, the strong and weak nuclear forces, are really interactions. Don't call them forces because they are particle interactions. And that's not what force is in the super relativity theory, my theory. Force is a bending of space. It's a deformation of space which is caused by a particular field, a magnetic field, an electrostatic field, and a gravitational field. All these three fields are a bending of the ether, which was what they called space back in the day before 1905. And those are the true forces. So particle interactions should be removed because they are at a secondary level. They should be out and saying they're too high up in the system. At the foundation, at the fundamental foundation, the forces are stress tensors in the field of the ether itself. It's an elastic material. So you pull it this way, you pull it that way. That causes the force of attraction or repulsion. So the quantum mechanics, the model is wrong. So you're never going to, that's why they can't bring in gravity because they want it to be a particle cause, a particle to particle interaction. And it's not. It's a particle to space interaction. So the other forces, the strong and weak nuclear forces, particles, interactions, collisions or whatever that result in particles breaking apart and so forth. And that is really too high up. It's not at the right level for describing the foundation of science and physics. So those four forces, you're trying to say two of them or three of them, electromagnetic force, are particle based. And everything that is really about the true forces of nature is only really three: magnetism, electrostatic field, and gravity. So setting aside the quantum mechanics model, the four-force model, which two of them or three of them are particle kind of interactions, and one is the true field, which is gravity, which doesn't fit. They can't they try to keep making it, a particle like the graviton, which they've never found, which they will continue to search for until the end of time and insist that it exists because that's how quantum mechanics works. It's all about particle to particle interactions, but there is no particle to particle interaction for a fundamental field like gravity, nor is there one for magnetism. If you get them and you ask them about magnetism and describe how that works, they will stumble, the physicists. An electrostatic field, they don't hardly even talk about it as a force on its own. So that's the deal with the four forces. The whole model is badly broken and should be discarded and replaced with my model.
Okay, gotcha. Now, what about I know that there was parts where I looked up and they had talked about maybe possibly the string theory, doing with the vibrations. What do you think of that?
I think the most brilliant minds in our current history are tied up on a search for something that's never been fully verified as existing. And I think it's highly, highly unlikely that the universe is, well, string theory really is just another kind of ether. Okay, so they have these little tiny strings and they're in these other hidden dimensions and membranes and so forth. And none of this can be tested or proven. And they know that. So they're free to keep working on it. So because there's nobody that can disprove the model by testing for it. Can't test for it. You can't really disprove it.
Right, exactly.
So there's certain things that don't make sense about the string theory. Well, many things. One of them is why strings and what makes them vibrate.
Right.
Things don't just move for no reason.
Exactly.
It's got to be a force applied. What force is that? What frequency are they at? And why can't we see them? Where are they? Well, they're too small or whatever. And they have so many different versions of string theory. There's a clear indicator something's wrong. When you have to have like 6 or 7 different models to describe something, at least 6 or 5 or 6 of them are going to be wrong, for sure. But they're so similar that basically the infection of wrongness spreads across the whole system. And it's a shame because our best minds are really burning the midnight candle on this thing with string theory. And we're not solving, physics is just not moving anymore. They really can't verify it. And I don't believe it's true at all. I think the Einstein model, it's the path that I followed, the Lorentzian Einstein model. It was the correct model after all, which is a classical field theory.
Right.
So that's what I have to say about quantum mechanics.
Nice.
Not an expert in quantum mechanics, just enough to know that it's really, it has its uses, its practical uses and stuff, and there's been some great advances because of it, like transistors and such. But really, it's a dead end, and that's why a great reason why physics is frozen in time at this point.
Now, how does this all correlate with the magnetism and gravity? How does this correlate with UFOs?
Well, that started out when I was pretty young too, the whole interest in that. Along with my interest in science, when I was a teenager, I became very interested in UFOs. And this seemed very sensible to me that we were being visited from other worlds. To me, it seemed even then as a child that how can we be the only ones in the universe? Look at it. There's so many stars and galaxies. You think we're the only ones and we're the center of the universe?
No.
Doesn't make sense.
Right.
There's no evidence for that. So then the trick then becomes, well, how did they get here? Because I know the distances are really huge. And so I see that there's ships from what I've read in the many books I've read on UFOs. I see that they don't have wings. They're not powered by jets or rockets. So there's a spatial bias field of some sort. And then as I read Project Blue Book and some of these other things, I read about the investigators, the Air Force investigators bringing magnometers, which are devices that measure magnetic fields. And I say, they know something we don't because they know to bring this thing and they're measuring magnetic fields. So must be UFOs use magnetic fields. And as I read on over the years, I came across more evidence that UFOs emit very powerful magnetic fields. And so I figured, well, somehow anti-gravity, magnetic fields they're related somehow. And I didn't know whether the magnetic field was a byproduct of the anti-gravity field or vice versa. In time, I came to realize that the anti-gravity field comes from the magnetic field. And it took me many, many, many years because I would ponder on it. Oh, it's got something to do with magnetism, but what? How? And I had to study magnetism and understand it and figure out a mechanical method for how the magnetic field can be used to create a powerful anti-gravity field. And eventually that's included, of course, in great explanations and detail in my book.
Right, yes, absolutely. And as I said, I just started reading that a couple days ago, so it's very interesting, and I'm trying to learn all this stuff because I'm not familiar with any of this stuff, so this is all very new to me. But UFOs and aliens I have always been fascinated with since I was very little. Have I
Yeah,
ever encountered anything of it? No, but I've just always had that feeling that there is somebody else out there other than us.
right.
Have you
I,
had any experiences with that? Have you?
yeah, sure.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, the first time I saw a UFO was when I was living in Miami, Florida, in 1970, 71, 72, that time frame.
Hmm.
And we were standing out, a bunch of us, by the pool one night. I was living in an apartment complex. In the Miami sky, not a whole lot of stars in the sky. It's a
Yeah.
lot of light pollution,
All
a
right.
lot of,
Yeah.
and moisture in the atmosphere, and you could barely see any stars at all. And one night there was these seven very bright orangey colored objects, and they were in a kind of a vertical pattern, one, two, three, four, five, up,
Yeah.
one on top of the other, and they were bobbing up and down, and thousands of people saw this. And the next day they were calling in to the news, or that night they were calling into the news bureau and the police and reporting it. And there was a big article in the paper about it the next day, that these UFOs were spotted over Miami. And one by one, one on top first, it shot up, straight up, like in a less than a second, it was gone. And you could see a little wisp of a line going straight up, and one after another, they went straight up, not across the sky,
Okay.
up into
Oh
space.
wow. Okay.
And so that was my first real encounter. And then many years later, here in this house where I am at tonight,
Hmm.
I woke up 3:30, so about that time in the morning, to get something to drink. I was at the refrigerator. It was like a TV show. This way this
Yeah.
goes.
Yeah.
This is really bizarre. Like the old Invaders
Yep.
TV show. I don't know if you remember that. It's probably before your time, but
I'm sure I've
um,
probably seen it.
but I'm looking in the refrigerator, and I'm seeing all these red and green flashing lights, it lighting up the kitchen. So I turned to look, because there's a window that looks out on over the lake,
Hmm.
and I said, "Boy, there must be some cop cars out there. They must have pulled somebody." So I'm looking for the cop cars, and I see there's this thing over the lake,
Uh-huh.
with a very oblong shaped thing with huge, bright red and green flashing lights,
Oh wow.
and it's just drifting very slowly, less
Uh-huh.
than 5 miles an hour, and it's going back and forth slowly, very slowly. And I said, "Well, my wife's got to see this. She's a big non-believer.
Oh.
I'm getting her up." So I run into the other room and wake her, shake her, "Come see this, come look." And we go out onto the porch to get a closer view. We leave the lights off because we don't want them to see that we're watching them.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
And this thing drifts back and forth very slowly.
Hmm.
And I says, "Congratulations. You're one of the few people who have now been able to see a starship, a ship from another planet,
Yeah.
right here in front of the house at 3:30 in the morning." And it made no sound.
Right. Oh
It was
wow.
not a helicopter or anything like that,
Hmm.
but it was over the lake,
Hmm.
and it was floating, and then it basically floated eventually to the west and out of sight.
Hmm.
So that was my definite, my second. I wish I had a camera that night, because that would have
Wow.
been something. I just was not prepared. And from that time on, I kept the camera. I still have it here by my desk,
That's
charged and ready, but
ready
I
just in
haven't seen
case.
it. Yeah, I haven't seen it since. I'm hoping maybe I get another
Maybe.
chance.
Maybe you will. You never know. But it's always
Yeah,
good to have it ready to go.
yeah,
Excuse me. Now, with all of this, I have, watched some documentaries and things on there's different military that have reported these while they're up in the air seeing these objects, but they had been kept quiet for so long. And I know there's the whole big thing with Area, 7 and all that. What are your beliefs on that? Do you believe that they already know this and they're hiding information from us?
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. After my book came out and I did some shows, some people contacted me who this particular person wanted to remain anonymous.
Anonymous.
So I respected that,
Right.
because there was two people that saw this UFO in the desert, and they've got a very close-up look at it. they were within touching distance. It was a small UFO.
Mm-hmm.
And they were able to read the markings on the UFO. And it said U.S. Air Force experimental.
Oh, wow.
And then they moved back. This thing made some winding noises and such, and then it took off and then went straight up.
Mm-hmm.
And so I know for sure, and there's so many other reports of airplane pilots flying over Area 51
Mm-hmm.
and seeing UFOs coming in from deep space and then just stop over the airfield and then just zip right in and land. Of course, we've got it. It's part of the dam of lies that the government has constructed to keep this quiet. It's the top secret. It is above top secret. UFOs, aliens, their technology, their propulsion technology is very well guarded secret. And it's going to be that way until something or someone forces their hand and they're forced to finally disclose the whole truth. I don't know when that's going to be. I'm hoping it's in my lifetime, but we'll see. We'll see how that goes. But yeah, definitely we know about it. I'm sure of it. And I'm sure by now, because it started what back in the mid to late 40s with Roswell, we've had a lot of time to perfect that technology, and maybe with help from some extraterrestrials, I don't know, but there were some key things that they looked for, that I looked for. And I realized two things that we need to build a UFO. We need room temperature superconducting wire.
Yes, I do remember
If
reading
that, yeah, if we've invented that, it's been classified.
Right.
If that's been discovered already, I'm sure it's been classified, because once you have that technology, you can make magnets powerful enough to have the full anti-gravity field effect. And the other thing is a power source, a compact power source that's capable of delivering several megawatts of power, continuous power, because these coils, really need a lot of power. And, I'm guessing at that number, but I know it's got to be a very powerful power supply, and you can't be running out of fuel in the middle of outer space.
Right. Yeah.
So it's got to be some type of technology, free energy technology or something of that nature that has probably been classified as well.
Right. Yeah.
So once you have those two things, you can build a UFO.
So you think we'll be able to do do you think we'll be able to do time travel anytime soon, or have any of that capability in the future?
Well, when you get to it in it's either the last chapter or the second to the last chapter, I think. You'll get to the Stargate technology, which I was kind of guided to write about. I was not going to include that in my book because, I only know so much about that, through the Montauk Project and Philadelphia experiment, which were the forerunners of the modern day Stargate technology, which I was able to learn about with the help of my friend Tamara Richardson, who is a psychic and medium, who gave me some keywords that I wound up searching on the internet. Because I knew one thing: if you're going to build a Stargate, and it's not the magnetic resonant field type, which they have a new type which uses something called fractal lenses. And this thing that I wasn't aware of, I looked it up and it says, well, fractal lenses are made of metamaterials. What's a metamaterial? Well, metamaterial is a type, and it's been invented, and you can look at it in articles and stuff. Within the material, it's configured in such a way as that it reduces two properties of the material, of space itself, permittivity and permeability. And if you reduce these properties of space, these are fundamental properties of space, you can change the speed of light. And I knew that's would have to be, when I started writing the chapter on Stargates, the first thing I say is, I don't know exactly how this is all going to turn out, but I know one thing for sure: something is going to have to go faster than the speed of light. because in order to get space to be tuned to other realities, other dimensions, other universes, other physical areas, and time travel, we're going to have to build an object that can accelerate photons to speeds beyond what they're capable of normally going at, so that you can come out with a frequency so high that it's going to cause that space to literally vibrate at extremely high rates of vibration or frequency. And this is going to allow that space to basically be tuned and open a portal to other dimensions and other times. And, all the mathematics and everything, it's way beyond what I know. But I'd love to be with the physicists that first worked that out and said, at this frequency, with this waveform, we can generate an opening in this time frame or whatever. And I believe we do have that now. Project Looking Glass is one of the, and there's an interesting video on that on the internet that I highly recommend. Look up Project Looking Glass, and there's this guy in a suit who, it's only like 15 minutes, and everything he says makes sense. It's very believable. And so there's some very interesting things going on, because they're using it to try to affect time in the future so that things turn out the way this group, the leaders, the elite, whoever, want it to turn out. And apparently they're having problems. Starting in the year 2012, when they were looking and trying to adjust the computer, well, they have a computer that models it apparently as well. The changes they made wouldn't affect the future. All the timelines are converging and into this one particular reality. It's called like the Great Awakening, which makes sense, which is something that I'm working for. So somehow this is all kind of weirdly connecting. Because there are a lot of people on this planet, near-death experiencers, who are also, they're coming with a mission. They're coming back because God is telling them, tell everybody there is an afterlife. There is a God. There is a Jesus. We're here. Nobody dies. And, go back and tell them your story. And so there's like a small army being built by the other side to make sure things turn out right over here in the long run. And I think maybe this Project Looking Glass has come upon this stumbling block that they can't modify the future to be the way they want it to be. And so, yes, I do believe that we have this technology, and I've theorized it in my book and said basically how it could be built in a very high level. And that's about all I know about that subject. And it's fascinating, and I was hoping that time travel was not possible, but apparently it is. And I found out through studying time, the only way you can do time travel and that it works, if it's going to work, this one thing has to be true. All of time is happening in parallel at the same moment. All of it. And sure enough, in NDE, experiencers are coming back and saying time is like all at once. So it's matching my theory, basically, in that it is accessible in that way. You just open a portal and jump to whatever time segment that you want to, because they're all happening at the same time. So it's possible in that way.
I'm just trying to put, every time I think of, though, like us being able to travel or have like flying cars, I think of the Jetsons. Why, I don't know. I just remember that cartoon, and hopefully one day we'll be able to do something like that. Why, I don't know, but that just kept popping into my head.
Well, that's one of the main themes of my book. I want that to happen. Edgar Cayce saw it in some of his visions. He saw in the future, when he was going to be reborn, his next reincarnation, they had these crafts. They were flying or hovering zipping over the landscape at great speeds. And I worked out how to build a supercar
Oh wow.
using and it's in my book. You might not have gotten to it. Called the slipwave spatial bias drive.
I just started reading that. Yes, I just started.
Yeah,
reading that. Yes.
and that uses a gradient magnetic field setup, whereas you have a strong magnetic field at the front of the craft.
Right.
Picture something simple, a simple shape like a cigar shape,
Right.
classic UFO shape. They have this shape because it's easy to build a magnetic field around that. You must encase the entire thing inside of the magnetic field. So you have a ring around the front. That's the first coil. Then you got a second coil a little further back in parallel with the other coil, and then the third and the fourth, all the way to the end. Each coil, the next coil up, has a stronger field until you get to the back of the ship, which has the strongest field. In this configuration, not only do you get anti-gravity, you block off the gravitational field, you shield it, but you have propulsion because that gradient magnetic field sets up a pressure gradient inside, within the center of the magnetic field going outwards, because magnetic fields stretch space. And that's how you get space to expand. You need an expansion of space in order to create an anti-gravity field, because I discovered that a contraction of space is gravity. So we need to reverse that effect, and you can do that with lots of electrons moving in wire in unison. A very coherent, powerful flow of current creates a very powerful magnetic field, which is a torsional reaction to moving charge. So the charge is moving through space. As it moves like this, like a twist, vortex shape, the field rotates with it in correspondence to the moving charge. And that's just what you need to make a powerful magnetic field that then, as a byproduct of that magnetic field, you get a spatial expansion and you get anti-gravity and propulsion. Because it can be used. Imagine it's like this simple mechanical model I'll give you. When you expand space outward, you got the rest of space that's a flat Euclidean geometry around this object. Right. But then you create this stress tensor sort of thing that bulges the space around your ship out in a kind of a cone shape. So the front of this pointing cone and at the back is the bulge. And it's like this. That bulge presses on the space. Like, imagine yourself facing a wall, and you put your palms on the wall, and you push forward. But you don't move forward, you move back. You move in the opposite direction. Right. That's the same thing that's happening with the spatial bias field, the slip wave. It's pushing this way, but forcing the ship to go in the opposite direction. So it has a velocity which is required, propulsion. And as long as you keep this field, and you can do a rowboat effect where you scan the rings, you hit them with ever increasing power, and you go. It's like a rowboat now. So you do that in a rapid sequence, and you get this ship to move at unbelievable velocities. And because this is the big important point, so strap in and listen to this. All right. This is really going to be good. Okay. Because magnetic field has an effect on space that's about to be discovered. Well, I'm sure the physicists who work for the government secrecy know this, but for the rest of the ones that don't, a magnetic field will reduce permittivity and permeability of space. Now, why is that so important? Why do I keep bringing that up? Because James Clerk Maxwell, a physicist way back when, discovered, the theory of electromagnetism, which was a very successful theory. He came up with an equation, C, the speed of light equals 1 over the square root of permittivity times permeability, the two properties of space. If you lower those numbers, see, the speed of light increases. The closer you get to zero, the faster the maximum speed of light becomes. So here is the key to creating a starship, because all you got to do is modify those two properties of space, and the way to do it is with a magnetic field. So the more intense the magnetic field, the more permittivity and permeability especially will drop. And so now you can go any speed you want beyond the speed of light. 100 times, 1,000 times, 1,000,000 times. So now, hey, if you want to go to Proxima Centauri, 4.2 light years away, at the speed of light, which we could never make a rocket that would do that, but let's just say we could, it would still take 4.2 years one way. That's not going to work. We're getting into portions of a lifetime just to get to the next star. What are you going to do for all that time? Twiddle your thumbs for 4.2 years? You'll go crazy.
Yeah, exactly.
So what needs to happen is you got to have a spaceship that can go thousands of times faster than the speed of light. And I'm providing a way for that to be possible. In fact, that must be what UFO technology, the entry-level technology, is using. There's probably other ways to zip across space, like using a Stargate kind of a technology. But I'm sticking with the basic, fundamental, entry-level system of space travel. And you use this method. And so you can go, let's say, 10,000 times the speed of light. Now we get to Proxima Centauri in a matter of minutes. That's practical. That's of high utility. You can get where you need to go in a hurry, because it's very unsafe to go at that speed. Because if you lose the magnetic field, the containment field that you're within, you lose that and you're moving beyond the speed of light. There's a set of transformations, mathematical transformations discovered by Hendrik, Antoine Lorentz, and Albert Einstein that will kick in. They are neutralized as long as you're within the slip wave. But they come into play the instant you drop the magnetic field. And what would happen to your ship is it would become as flat as a pancake. Its mass would increase to near infinity. It would slow down because there would be a massive inertial thing that you would feel that would crush your body and destroy everything in the ship. It would be instant death. So you want to get to where you're going quickly, because while you're moving at these speeds, you're not safe. If that field drops, if there's like a glitch in one of the coils, you want to know ahead of time, and you want to have another coil online replacing it before the other one fails. You must never attempt to stop by just turning off the magnets. If you do this, you're dead. You have to use the magnets to reverse your speed, slow you down relative to the absolute stationary space. That's what really counts. You have to slow yourself down to those levels, 0.001% of the speed of light, and then drop the magnetic field. And then you'll be fine. You won't even notice anything. But this is very important. So whoever's going to build those first starships, they got to know you must not drop the field while you're moving beyond the speed of light, or even close to it. Very bad things will happen.
I'm just very fascinated at how much you know about this. I mean, you didn't really go to school for this, though, did you?
No, I was self-taught, and let's face it, I'm getting help from somewhere. Because I wake up, for me, it's typical to wake up between 3 and 5 in the morning and do mind experiments. I was inspired by Einstein. And I would look at particles, and I would look to see how they worked. I would try to see them, and so there's some sort of remote viewing thing going on. So I am absolutely sure, and my readings confirm this, that I'm getting help from the other side. Okay. I accept that. I don't have a problem with it.
Yeah.
It's what needs to be done. It's unusual. It's a unique situation that I'm in this situation that I'm in, that I'm not a classically trained physicist. I just studied on my own
Right.
and kept working on these problems until everything made sense, because one of my founding principles is the universe makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a theory that doesn't make sense, it's not right.
Right.
And, so quantum mechanics is its weakest part is in its interpretation. It makes no sense. And so the physicists of this time have lost their grip on reality. The theory of super relativity, as you read the book, the one thing you're going to say more and more, this really makes sense. This has got to be the way it works. Why haven't we figured this out sooner?
Mm-hmm.
And it's actually a fairly simple system, and that's why I was able to do the math, and I have it on ResearchGate for the solution for the origin of gravity and mass. I was able to demonstrate that mathematically using nothing but equations that came from Newton's time.
Mm-hmm.
It's to physicists, that's relatively simple math. To the rest of us, it's fairly complicated, but
right. Yeah.
I just worked it up because I never stopped thinking about it. My mind would always run in the background. I'm watching TV. Does this have anything to do? Does this Star Trek episode have anything to do? Is there valid statements being made? Is there valid models being talked about?
Mm-hmm.
Always working in them, trying to fit the pieces of the puzzle together. Over a full lifetime of 45 some years, I was able to piece things together and they started to interlink because there was a pattern in nature that I discovered. And mainly it came from studying the photon, primary particle, when I realized how that particle moves on its own at the speed of light without having a jetpack on its back.
Yeah.
Which is, by the way, a mystery to current day physicists. If you ask them what's the origin of or how do particles move, you'll start to get arguments. They'll try to talk you out of asking that question, and if you insist, they'll say, "Well, particles really don't move. They're in probability clouds and they just pop in and out. They're not, they're not moving, even though." You could take them over to a cloud chamber and you can see them zipping through the mist. Looks like they have those particles have a path and they have a velocity. How do you explain that?
Right.
They're not popping in and out. You could see it, for God's sake. So it's basic fundamental mechanics that's going to save the day in the end and get us back on the right path. But I got a substantial mountain to climb to convince the people of this time, the scientists, the people in authority, that their model was wrong. It's never been right, and it won't ever be right. And that's why Einstein argued with Niels Bohr and Heisenberg and these other guys. Hey, this is an incomplete system. Don't take it too literally. Don't try to use it to solve the theory of everything. But nobody listens to them.
Right.
Yeah, that's very sad.
I'm just looking through here. I know we have a couple of questions in chat.
Oh, good.
So I'm just going to grab those here real quick.
Sure.
And see if you can answer any of these. This is a little bit different topic for some of our guests. But they're asking questions, so I'm glad to see that.
Yeah, I want that.
Yes. So one of the questions is, what are your views on Tesla coils?
Oh, God. I love this stuff. Do you think this is somehow just a coincidence that they would ask the very question? I'm setting up a lab now. I'm about to do an experiment that's very Tesla-like. Tesla was one of the greatest inventors, maybe the greatest inventor and visionary, right up there with Einstein. Einstein was a different type of visionary. Both were visionaries, but
Mm-hmm.
Tesla was of a more practical nature. He was really into, electronics and making things. And Tesla coil is an amazing thing. I played with it when I was a kid. I loved it. But I'm making something now that is inspired by Tesla.
Oh wow. Okay.
So I don't want to say anything more than that
That's
because
okay.
I have to prepare. If it works, I have to prepare a way to announce it that keeps me safe.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. Absolutely. I get that 100%. All right. Let's see here. The next question is, do you feel there are many different kinds of aliens, or are they all the same and work the same way?
No, there's as many aliens as there is other types of creatures on this planet versus humans, and it's an insurmountable amount, nearly infinite. I mean, you go to all the other galaxies, and there's so much life in this galaxy alone that we're so unaware of what's really out there. There's all kinds of aliens, and a good example of how many there are comes from Howard Storm's near-death experience, where he's talking with Jesus, and Jesus tells him, "I've been to every planet. I haven't just been to the Earth. I've done the same thing on virtually every other planet everywhere." And then he shows him all the different types of aliens. And they get weirder and weirder looking. So there's all different kinds of shapes and sizes, just kind of like what you saw in Star Wars and the cafe that they had at the beginning of that one movie. There's all different noses and eyes and arms and things like that. It's pretty much that way. So there's a nearly infinite amount of aliens zipping around all over the place, not only in this universe, but in other universes and other dimensions. Because what I've found is that there's an infinite amount, because God is creating universes all the time, and it's you're getting into that which is infinite, and it's very hard for me to think about that, or anybody really, to
Right.
a finite being to deal with things eternal and infinite. But there's loads of aliens, so I look forward to the day when we could chat freely with aliens and get some of their wisdom and knowledge, because these aliens have been around longer than we have. We're a new planet, very new planet, just coming out of Stone Age, and we're not aware of anything. We're at the point 0.00001, experience of reality of what's out there. We just, there's more than American Idol and who won the Super Bowl here.
Right, exactly.
There's a lot more going on than that. Believe me, there's loads of aliens and loads of civilizations, loads of history. And when we finally get to meet them, it's going to be earth-shaking, and it's going to widen our minds and our beliefs, and it's going to bring us to, I believe, a utopian society, because we'll learn to break our bad habits of war and greed and all these other things that are holding us back very badly right now.
Yeah.
There's loads of aliens out there. I am sure of it, and some are good, and I'm sure some are probably not so good. So hopefully, we watch where we tread.
Yes, exactly. Mind our P's and Q's.
Yeah.
Okay, we have time for one more question before I start to wrap things up. And so the last question they want to know is, do you think that we have doubles, and if so, are they aliens?
Oh, you mean like doppelgangers, that kind of thing?
Uh-huh. I'm assuming that's probably what he means, but...
I mean, there's one I've seen or I've heard of that lives in the same town as I do here in winter. Yeah, he's a doctor, and the last job I had, I worked in a hospital, and he's not my exact double. We just look alike.
Yes.
So much so that I walked up into this one floor, apparently where this doctor works in the hospital, and I'm an IT guy. I'm going to fix the computers or whatever. They think I'm him. So the nurse comes up and asks for some orders for a patient. I had a little suit jacket on, so I could pass for a doctor. And I says, "You must have me mistaken with somebody else." And I keep hearing it. There's this doctor that looks exactly like me running around the hospital, but I've never seen him.
Oh, wow.
People see me in the, hey, I saw you in the car the other day. You drove, but no, that wasn't me.
Oh, my goodness.
So, I mean, physically, I think that's going to happen. Whether they're exact duplicates in some other universe or something, I don't know about that, but maybe it's possible.
Yeah.
I don't know.
You never know. I guess hopefully one of these days we'll find out, but that's just kind of a mystery.
Yeah. That one I don't know for sure.
That's okay. No worries.
Yeah.
So where can people find your book, Master of Reality, and where can they find you if they have any questions or anything like that? Do you have social media that they can follow you on?
Yeah, I'm on Facebook. You just look up my name on there, and it's got a Master of Reality big banner going across there. You can't miss it. I have a website, www.super-relativity.com, super-relativity.com. And I also have a YouTube channel.
Okay.
Hopefully, if you let me, I could put this on that channel as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, I like to keep a record of everything I'm doing, because when we do this is very important what we've done today, because it's very deliberate what I'm doing. I'm setting beacons out, information beacons, warning beacons, not so much a warning beacon as it is, I'm here, find me.
Right, yeah.
Read the book and find me. If you need information on how this thing works or how that thing works, I'm here to help as long as I'm around. I want people to become aware of the theory of super relativity and that the unified field theory solution has been solved, and we can build anti-gravity cards. I very much want that technology to happen in my lifetime. And so I'm going to try to do what I can to help companies do the research and so forth, as I'm going to be doing myself via the Tesla kind of thing that we won't give too much detail on.
Much about right now.
Well, I've asked for an experiment. When you'll get to it at the last chapter of the book, I asked for everybody to do an experiment. I guess I'm going to do that experiment myself as well.
Okay.
So, trying to push things along. Sometimes you just got to do what you got to do.
That's right.
And, so there you go.
Absolutely. Well,
no matter where you are, that's where you are. There you go. The old Buckaroo Banzai.
Before we wrap things up, I like to give a shout out to everybody who was in chat. We had Darren, we had Allie, we had Kim, we had Cynthia, Matt, and Angie in chat tonight. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for everybody who was not in chat but listening. We appreciate each and every one of you. We'd like to thank our guest, Mark Fiorentino, author of Master of Reality. Go check out that book. Check out his website again at www.super-relativity.com, and you can find him on Facebook and go look him up on YouTube. Thank you, Mark, so much for being on. It was awesome. Very mind-blowing to me. Very new topic for this show. It was awesome to learn all this information. Can't wait to finish your book. So thank you once again, and hopefully you get that little project that you're working on, and we'll hear about that in the future.
Yeah, so I'll contact every show that I've been on if it works, and we'll have to have some sort of a showing or something. Yes. I'm not sure I'm going to handle that yet, but I'm thinking about it.
You're thinking about it. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And make sure you guys join us again next week. We'll be on site doing a live investigation. So thank you once again, Mark. Thank you for everybody for listening, and we will talk to you all next week.
Thank you for listening to REP Paranormal and Friends. Be sure to check out Kim and Allison on Facebook at REP Paranormal Busters.